my 10 topics, and I will go through them quick and gloss over some, because if I give 5 minutes per 10 suggestions, it will be 50 minutes, and I assure you I won't keep you here for that long. I will go over a couple quickly, a couple a bit more slowly. Let me just see by way of preamble. Yes. Before I go into these 10 topics, let me just say one sort of broad organizing principle around which I string this is, in most economies, certainly in emerging economies, whenever you think of an economic problem, there is a shortage of pulses, there is a shortage of bread, tourism is not doing well, think of anything. The first tendency on the part of government is, how should I produce more bread? How should I produce more pulses? How should I get tourism going? But the thinking has to be, how should I create the incentives so that ordinary people produce the bread which other ordinary people need? How do I create the incentives so that the tourism industry finds it in their interest to provide the sort of things that you need for tourism to flourish? It's impossible for government to directly deliver on the needs of a society, certainly a society as big as ours, but even for any small society, it's impossible. To try to do that is folly. You will stumble and you will make mistakes. In government, your aim has to be to think of the levers, the critical switches, the knobs of society. You have to find out which ones are those vitals, knobs and levers and switches, turn them on and off to create the incentives so that people do for themselves what they need. And the government has to play the role of an enabler. Again, to give the government this kind of a backseat is treated as market fundamentalism. Very often, the left position is taken with a large government. And again, I've been in government, I'm not in favor of a large government. Government has an important role to transfer a certain amount of income from the rich to the poor. But government needs to remain lean and efficient. It needs to simply transfer and create the mechanism so that the very targets that you would try to fulfill with a large government is done with a small government. It's with this attitude to policy making that I'll get into 10 topics. I should tell you that these 10 topics that I've assembled together, not topics, the 10 policy recommendations, are a bit of a category mistake in the sense of Gilbert Ryle, that all 10 are not in the same sort of classification. Some are very big ticket reforms, some are smaller, more immediate reforms, and some you cannot do in the next 10 months. All I'm saying is that you should take the first steps towards these reforms. And also, this is not an exhaustive list. A country like ours is all the time thinking of newer policies, and even now that all of you are gathered, I should have said, thank you for coming here, because there is a huge political event going on in the country and in the city, in fact, right now. But when you watch television, you feel that that's the overwhelming interest that's enveloping the country and India. But I have to tell you that in the Ministry of Finance, our work goes on as usual. You're thinking in terms of policies, economic policies, and a lot of that, of course, goes into the background when there is such big breaking news about such as for the presidential nomination that is going on right now, but those are going on. There are certain policies on which there is virtual certainty that they are going to come in, like the direct taxes code will come in April 2013, so I will not talk about that. So there are also certain things I don't talk about because I feel fairly confident that these are coming in, but with that, let me get in. The first one, number one, administrative reform. This is a big one. It won't happen in a day, but if we can effect this, it is a turning around for India. It can really have the economy surging ahead. Our business ethos is slow and cumbersome. The World Bank puts out data on a variety of decision-making in government which enables businesses to flourish, take decisions, to have contracts enforced. India does poorly on that. It is still a country where the red tape is big and cumbersome. We've had this from 1947. This is a system that was actually the old colonial system, our administrative system that we inherited. But countries that inherited this, including UK itself, have reformed the system vastly, whereas we stayed on with this. This is one area we need to work, and I want to give a couple of specific suggestions. One structural flaw in the way we go about our governance is, India tends to be what I think of, and now that I have an insider's view of this, it's an overlapping democracy, or a pyramidical democracy, in the sense that you engage everyone in every decision making. But that immediately slows down. Democracy does not mean that in every decision you engage everybody. What it must mean that everyone plays a role in some important decision. So what you need is a kind of compartmentalized system, and I'm talking even within the government. There is far too much of a pyramidical system of signature taking for each decision to be taken. Instead, there should be many more in government who should have the right to do a final signature on a file and say, decision taken, without sending it further up for clearance. Occasionally, people will be reviewed. Wrong decisions taken, you will be suitably called up, punished depending on the level of the wrongness of the decision. But we cannot have everyone getting in on every decision. That slows us down. Even simple things like, I believe, when you set up a commission, a committee to suggest some new policies, what we should try to move towards is not make it a 20-member committee that comes out with a joint report. We should increasingly move to a 1-member committee with 19 advisors. But the final report is that 1 member. You choose that member very carefully, choose a professional, choose someone honest, choose someone far-thinking, put that person in charge of this particular reform, and give that person 19 advisors, but it is not as if it's a report coming out from all 20. Before I joined government, I was on a committee on higher education, and it was a big group, and we were arguing, and finally I put in something I actually hate to do, but I did put in a dissenting note, simply because I felt I could not go along with what that committee was putting forward. What I'm suggesting is that instead of having a big committee and every proposal coming something which is collectively agreed, it's just like when you are calling in a doctor for a serious case. There is one doctor who takes the principal responsibility. That doctor may consult others, but if there are 20 doctors who collectively decide every step to take, it will be a disaster, and that is the way we should go. There is one more remark on this which may seem a bit of a surprise. I think India needs a larger bureaucracy. I have to say this carefully because it sounds just so wrong to say that. I don't mean more bureaucracy and more bureaucratic procedures. But if you look at the senior staffing of the government,